Hello, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, where we educate, enlighten, and entertain. I want to thank Jeannie White, station manager, for producing the show, writing the blog. Folks, read this blog. It's going to have a lot of information about my special guest. And thank you to Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio. And I just want to tell everybody, Happy New Year. And if it can't be happy, then I hope you find a peaceful new year. I am so excited about my guest, folks. I love my guest. She is multi-talented. I'm jealous of her talent. She is talented beyond measure. She is an author. She's a composer. She was a music teacher. She's a caregiver. She has her own podcast, Your Creative Chord, CHORD. She has her own Facebook group, Creative Memorial Planning, which I belong to. It is fantastic. I urge you to join it. And she has her website, creativechord.com, which you will find a lot of information on there. You know what, folks? We plan our life, don't we? Where we're going to go to college, maybe who we're going to marry we have in our mind. But why is it we don't plan our end of life and where we want to spend our resting place, if that's how you want to put it? Here on Chatting with Betsy, I talk about the taboo, and I will talk about the uncomfortable. It's not uncomfortable to me talking about the end of life. I've made my prearrangements. And I want to welcome to Chatting with Betsy my new friend who I love, Jenny Lee Hodgins. Am I saying your last name right?
Yes, you did. You said my name right. Jenny Lee Hodgins. Yes. I can't believe you pronounce my last name correctly. Like no one does that. So.
That's why I asked you before I recorded, because up here in New Jersey, we say Hodgkins.
That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't have that many extended relatives around us, so it's unusual to meet another Hodgins, and interesting that they pronounce it Hodgkins up there. But thank you for the incredible, exuberantly supportive introduction. And I do want to say,
You're welcome.
I know you mentioned my website is Your Creative Chord, Your Creative Chord, CHORD, and I'm sure we'll drop the links in there, not just Creative Chord, but YourCreativeChord.com.
Your Creative Chord, okay.
Yeah, but
thank you.
I really respect Betsy. We just had a little mutual admiration chat right before this, but I just want to share with your listeners. I am very moved by what you do. You're in my Creative Memorial Planning group, of course, and you've been incredible with your openness and your willingness to just be honest about your journey with your husband and through loss. And you've just been an amazing force there. But I know you also have your own Facebook group, which I'm just now kind of getting involved in. And it's just a wonderful, noble, down-to-earth, helpful way that you do things. And you, like me, we want to make the death talk normal, and natural and readily available. And I respect you for doing that and for what you do through your journey with your husband's passing. And so definitely mutual admiration club here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm almost going to start crying here. Thank you so much. That touches me. No, that's okay, deeply. It's great tears, actually. Actually, a year ago today was Matt's service, was Matt's funeral service. And I have to tell the audience this, because this is Jenny's, what she does. And I wish I met Jenny 3 years ago. I really do, because I would have hired her.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. I knew that Matt was going to die. He had Alzheimer's. And something told me in December 2019, go for the prearrangements. And I had started like a few months before that with the opening and closing cost of the grave, because his father just so happened to have a plot, and I just happened to look into that. But you have in your creative memorial planning, you have different alternatives. And I would like to know what they are, because I'm really just I'm curious, but I want the audience to know exactly what it is that you do. And folks, I'm telling you, after you hear this podcast, you need to jump, and I mean jump, into Jenny's Facebook group and also on her internet, because this woman's phenomenal. And listen to her podcast too, because I think that's great. Go ahead.
You're killing me, Betsy. Thank you. Well, first I want to say,
you're welcome.
Matt, I wish we could hug. You know, this is the pandemic and we can't actually hug, but I hope you feel my airwave hug to you for all of that. And
I
also,
do.
Yeah, we are definitely our kind of people. And first of all, I want to say again, I'm sorry for your loss, and what a memorable day today to talk about this, and what a wonderful way to tribute, Matt, to help other people think about this so they're not going through this kind of additional burden and suffering and expense, you know, at the moment of it, which literally is what brought me to do what I do, that I've been through my own multiple experiences of tragedies. And my brother died really young at 28. Two of my very dear friends passed away very suddenly, one from cancer, one from a heart attack. Just recently I learned another friend passed away, losing her battle with cancer. And having gone through that and helping others, you know, multiple times with creating some kind of a goodbye ritual because they didn't have anything set in place. I did that so many times with my dear friend Tina, and that when she passed away February 2019, I ended up doing hers. And it just, then the pandemic, you know, struck this February, basically March-ish. And I decided, you know, I do a lot of creative things, as you mentioned, but I decided in March that I would pivot and open up this creative memorial planning group because of those experiences and because of the incredible relevance right now with the pandemic and the amount of global loss and suffering that's come from that. And just really wanted to do this. But I wanted, as you know, Betsy, I'm extremely direct and very different from your typical end-of-life planner in that very specifically I take a very strong stance to go the opposite direction of the traditional funeral, corporate, or very heavily religious-based funeral plan. I don't do that at all for the most part. You know, if people have some religious or spiritual aspects that they want to incorporate, absolutely. You know, my point is to tailor it customized to the person's values, to leave a loving legacy, and to especially have something set up for the comfort of surviving loved ones. But when I say alternatives, because I know that's your main question to me, like what in the world is an alternative? Because most people don't do anything about this until there's a loss. And then the first thing they do is scramble to a local corporate funeral home, which I don't call funeral homes or funeral parlors. I call them corporate funeral because they are very clearly for profit. And most people under duress, they go through these very traditional customs of choosing expensive and planet-damaging options because they don't know any other way for the most part. Most people aren't aware of all these alternatives. So when I say alternatives, I'm talking about a couple of different things. I'm talking about specifically ways that you can set up in advance, and I highly recommend pre-planning this in advance. And this is what I do, by the way, as a creative memorial planning coach. I help you sort all of this out. But the first thing I'm talking about when I say alternatives is how to handle the remains, because you don't have to do it in that traditional way. And there are ways that you can handle that are far more, and I'm a big nature advocate because I love nature. It's very important to my life, to my creativity. So a lot of what I do is I introduce ideas that are less planet destructive. This is what I'm going for, less planet destructive ways of handling remains and less expensive by default. They happen to be less expensive than the traditional route, than the destructive traditional way of getting elaborate caskets and having gravestones and grave plots and markers and, you know, all of that, limousines and facility and staff services. So the first part of that is handling the remains. I'm offering, as a matter of fact, in my group, in the Creative Memorial Planning Facebook group, if you just look for that Creative Memorial Planning on Facebook, you'll find it. Happy to have you there. I give a lot of detail about 6 eco-friendly ways to handle remains specifically. And I don't know if we have time to go through all of that, but the gist of it is they're less planet destructive, they're less costly, and many of these ways can be tailored in a much more simple, more personal, meaningful way. The second thing I mean when I say alternatives, besides how you choose to handle the remains, the second part I'm talking about is a goodbye ritual and a legacy. So you do not have to have, a religious-dominated or corporate-dominated traditional, funeral service for your plan or for your loved one. There are like as many different ways to do a goodbye ritual, whether that be an actual memorial service or even an outdoor kind of service where you get together and have an actual service, or it could simply be, a lot of people don't even want that formality. A lot of people want to do something really simple. Nowadays, one of the alternative goodbye rituals could simply be the involvement of an end-of-life doula or a death doula or a celebrant. That's what I did as a celebrant. A celebrant, if people don't know, is someone who kind of functions like a minister, but depending on your spiritual beliefs, incorporates what you want into the service and facilitates it. That's a lot of what I did with all these memorials that I've helped plan and facilitate. So, one alternative would be, for example, just for an example of an alternative, you can have death doulas come in, which is actually something I've included in my personal end-of-life plan. If you don't know what a death doula is, these people are phenomenal. There's a huge movement right now, a death movement or a death talk movement, and a movement for these far more personalized, gentler, simpler, less costly ways of dealing with end of life. So for me, for example, if I live to a ripe old age or I get some kind of a disease, because I'm single and I don't have children, I don't want to burden my extended family or my friends, with that. And because I'm single, if I don't marry someone before I die, is anybody listening? Put a call out. If I don't marry someone before I die, I don't want to burden him either, but still, then I want to incorporate, in my plan, having an end-of-life doula, someone that is basically, they're very much like hospice. Hospice workers are trained in helping people with the medical and the physical aspects of illness and near death and through the dying experience, whereas death doulas or end-of-life doulas are more trained toward the psychological, the emotional preparation for the family and for the dying person. So for me to have like a doula incorporated in my end-of-life plan means that I'm not going to be alone no matter who's, if someone's not left around me, in my family or friend sphere, but also they guide my family and friends. If there are surviving loved ones around me, they can kind of be a buffer and help you recognize what's going on. And they can also be part of the end-of-life ceremony. There can be an in-home, alternative ceremonies often include really private, intimate, especially right now with the pandemic, for example, quiet, intimate ceremonies where there's just the family, and often the death doula, or we call them transition doulas or end-of-life doulas, and sometimes even the celebrant can be involved to facilitate kind of a more planned out, thoughtful, in-home celebration. These are just, alternative ideas off the top of my head, but there are other things like water burials or the scattering of ashes at a meaningful place, or burying, having a tree planting ceremony with, a biodegradable urn with the cremains that are amended. And I'm going to put a plug in about that, because a lot of people don't realize, don't just bury a bunch of, human cremains because they are not planet friendly unless you use an amendment kit that takes the sodium and the pH levels down so that they don't kill the plant. So just keep that in mind if you want to do a tree planting kind of ceremony. These are all, and there's like so many other ideas that you can do as alternative ways to plan a goodbye ritual or how you want to handle the remains. This is what I cover often in my Creative Memorial Planning Facebook group. So if you want to go in a lot more depth I absolutely invite you to join and check that out. So I hope that answers a little bit of your question.
Yes, that does. Yes, that does. Jenny, this my audience is a global. So can you help somebody that's in another country plan whatever you want to call it, a funeral or a service or whatever they like? Can they hire you?
Well,
to get ideas.
Yeah, as a creative memorial planning coach, I mainly deal with people in the U.S.
Okay.
The laws and things are very different, but I can certainly, in the group they can ask me questions, and there are other people in my group I might add that are also global that know some of these answers. Like I have lots of doulas and celebrants, and I have people that deal with legalities and health type documents, things like that for their legacy. And there are people in like the UK, Australia, I'm trying to think, Canada, all these different countries, and they have their particular laws and availability of certain things. So I may not personally do that for someone out of the country, but I have resources for that within the group, and I know that there's somebody in there that can help specifically if you want to hire someone like me to plan out your stuff. It really depends on the laws of the country or the state. In our case, many cases on the state itself.
Yes, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I think it's important, Jenny, for people to know that there are different ways to have a service, for like a better word, I call it.
Right.
You could, that's why it's important to plan now when you are alert and living and state your wishes. I knew what my husband's wishes were. He wanted the song In the Garden played, and he loved Johnny Cash. So I played that at his service, and I didn't go by the book. I didn't know about you, at that time. And I had a pastor of a church, just give, because Josh wanted that. He wanted, this pastor to talk. And Josh talked, I talked, had a couple of friends say something about Matt. And it was, very informal. I had a graveside service. People need to realize it doesn't have to be in a building. It doesn't have to.
Correct.
It does. It doesn't have to be starched. It could be whatever you want it to be, whatever your loved one would like for it to be. And I think people really need to realize that and to plan on this. And it's so important. People don't want to talk about it. I even asked my mother. My mother's 90, God bless her. She'll be 91 in March. And I asked her, about end-of-life wishes. She doesn't want to talk about it. She goes, I just want, I just want a Jewish funeral. That's it. I don't want to, I can't talk about it. And people need to, and I tried to encourage her, people need to talk about it. And, why is it uncomfortable?
Well,
we need to learn.
Yes, we've been trained to leave that to the professionals, and they take your chunk of cash and they do it for you, so you don't have to think about anything. And I mean, that's my experience with the traditional corporate route, and it's very similar in my experience as well with a lot of religious institutions. They also like to, the religious leader or the religion itself teaches, leave it up to the leader of the religion. And this is not who I am. This is not what my creative memorial planning group is about. I'm more here to, first of all, help people to start that conversation and help people understand that there are as many ways to do this as there are people and their individual preferences. So what's right for you is absolutely right. It doesn't matter that it's different from the traditional way, for example. So I think I want to make that really clear. I'm not your cup of tea if you want a traditional, highly religious-based, service for your stuff. I'm more to help you personalize something that's simpler. And when you have, elders, that is not uncommon for elders, not even elders. I have friends that are just a little bit older than me in their 60s, and they don't want anything. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. And because I've been through that scenario and had to help so many people, including my own loved ones, when there was no plan, I am so adamant that I don't care that you don't want anything. Look, this is for, to help us in our way tribute your life because we love you, because of our bond with you. We want a beautiful, appropriate tribute for you. But also, when you're gone, we will need something for our comfort, for our shared experience of losing you. So I think, for me, I'm very adamant and direct in the way I talk to people about, look, get rid of your excuses. I get it. Our culture is not trained to talk about this, but guess what? All of you are capable of planning your own end of life. Plan whatever you want to include, whether it's a legacy document or an actual service or an outdoor thing or an in-home thing or the scattering of ashes or a water burial or a planting of a tree or just simply a few words and, said, whatever you want it to be. And if you can't think through or you're not willing to think through those difficulties, then it falls on, unfortunately, your loved ones. And this is generally my audience, people my age and older, and we're the ones that are going to have to deal with that. So the first thing I would recommend is, start that conversation. And often when people say, I don't want to talk about it, then maybe share with them, well, I get that, but the thing is that when you're gone, we need something for us. So how about this, or how about that? Would you like this? Just offer some little suggestions on, for example, where would you like it to be? Or would you like us to play some music? Or would you like us to share your favorite spiritual quote or a poem? Or do you want to say anything to us? And start having these conversations and taking notes so that at least you have, and it may take multiple conversations to kind of get that out, but I think that's really important, just having the conversation with people. And if you're really stuck, in a dead-end road where someone is just, and this happens, where someone is completely unwilling to address it, then discuss it among the people that are going to be left, and come up with a harmonious solution that everyone can kind of agree with. Because if you don't, when it happens, you're grieving. You and I know, Betsy, this is hard to go through.
Yeah.
So when you're grieving, you don't want people to have to make those decisions when they're, emotionally really heavy, and they may not agree with each other. And in some cases, there's substance issues going on because of the way that they cope with their grief. This is much better to handle this, is what I'm saying, well before, something happens. And just, if you don't know what alternatives are out there, join my group, because this is what I talk about all the time.
Yes, absolutely. Let's see, this is 2021 already. I think it was 2018. I went down to I went to the cemetery, to pay the opening, to set up a fee for opening and closing, the plan, financial plan, payments. And if by the time Matt died, I had his paid for.
Wow.
Which was good.
Yeah.
And I just had to pay the rest of the, funeral expense.
That's
and,
amazing.
Folks, I have to say, it's not easy. It's not easy doing prearrangements, whatever you choose to do. I felt, personally, and I shouldn't have, but I did, I thought I was doing something behind Matt's back, and of course I wouldn't tell him I was planning his funeral. But I felt guilty, and I know I shouldn't have. It's unjustifiable guilt, and I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad that I did that. I knew what he wanted. Matt specifically told me, and this was his wish, that he didn't want to be cremated. He made that very clear.
Okay.
So, we may not agree with our loved ones, but we have to honor and respect their wishes.
That's right.
And this is what people, have to understand. And it's important, for that. Jenny Lee, I want to thank you so much for coming on my show. I can't believe how fast the time goes. I could have you on again and again.
Yes.
You just are amazing, and
thank you. So are you.
Thank you. And it's going to be in the blog, but could you just tell the audience where they can reach you media-wise?
Sure. Oh, sure. And thank you for including that. And thank you for everything you did for Matt and for sharing that message, because he wasn't capable of making that decision, and you did it based on what he wanted. I think that's the most important thing. We're honoring our loved ones' wishes in a way that resonates with everybody. So kudos to you. And thank you. So if people want to get in touch with me, first of all, I wholeheartedly invite you to join Creative Memorial Planning Facebook group. Just go to Facebook and search Creative Memorial Planning, and then there's 3 questions you answer to get in for admission, and boom, you're in. Another way is I have a little Creative Memorial Planning kind of checklist of things for you to think about to kind of get your wheels spinning. So you can go to my website, which is Your Creative Chord, CHORD, yourcreativechord.com/CMP checklist. And CMP is for Creative Memorial Planning. So it's yourcreativechord.com/CMP checklist. And that'll get you a checklist and get you on my radar, and you'll see lots of the content and stuff available to you after that from me if you're curious about learning more about these alternatives that, to the traditional ways of planning. And thank you, Betsy.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And folks, I have to be honest. A mutual friend who's also a host on Passion World Talk Radio, Dr. Marianne Matzo, invited me to the Creative Planning, your Facebook group for the summit.
Yes.
And I said to myself, well, Matt's already gone. Why? I don't know if I want to go. And I'm so glad. I'm so grateful, folks, that I went to is it Sunset Summit? Is that the name of it?
Yes.
Or is it Sunset? And I'm so glad I went, folks, because I learned so much, and it was inspiring. So I highly suggest you to go into Jenny's group, and I tell people all the time, you can belong to more than one group. I do. Exactly. I'm an administrator in other groups. You can belong to more than one group. I'm learning from Jenny's. I learned from all these different groups. And the more you learn,
friendships too. Yeah.
Yes, you build friendships, and you could collaborate. I mean, it's just a phenomenal group that you have, and I'm so proud to know you. And you're welcome. I'm proud that you are speaking up about this very important topic because it needs to be talked about, and we need to start to talk. We need to talk about death and dying. It is a part of life, folks, as ironic as that sounds, but it is a part of life, and we need to teach our children about that.
None of us are going to avoid that. We're not immune. None of us are. And as I know from my own tragedies, it doesn't matter how old you are. It can happen at any moment, especially, and I'm sorry to sound so alarmist, but the pandemic has killed so many people, and we have to keep that in mind. You can live mindfully when you address death completely, and you have that plan, you have that peace of mind, the burden's off of your mind, and you've got the satisfaction, as I'm sure you had, Betsy, even now have, for the fact that you planned ahead and you did it in a way to honor your loved one. So that's what I'm about. And I want to share too, thank you for giving a shout out to Dr. Marianne Matzo. She's the one that invited you to my group, and I had invited her. In the Creative Memorial Planning group, we had something called Sunset Summit, where I invited 14 different experts on many overlapping topics around, death and the dying to help people and to educate people. It's just free content. And I'll be doing that again, in a couple of months. I'll have another one, so stay tuned for that. But just wanted to give a shout out to that, and I'm so glad that you joined, because, Betsy, your information about Alzheimer's and what you've gone through is incredibly valuable in dementia and all of that. It's so important for people to learn about, for me too, because usually when this kind of stuff hits, just like when people are dealing with a loss, we just don't know what to do. We don't know who to turn to. So this is so important. I shout out to you, and just want to reiterate what you're saying. Please join some Facebook groups, people, and you can join many. There's many to learn from. It's a great way to learn how to get through these things, and to, like Betsy and I, connect with new people and deepen your friendships and your understanding, so you're more equipped and capable of handling what we all have to face. So thank you. I'm very long-winded about it. I'm so excited.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for coming on and sharing what you do, and thank you for the work that you do. I really appreciate it. Folks, my group is hashtag, you're welcome, my group is hashtag Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement. It's on Facebook. You don't have to have Alzheimer's. It's for any dementia. And if you're a caregiver or not a caregiver, you could join. If you want to be educated, please join. You're welcome to join. As always, folks, please share this podcast. Thank you for listening. Chatting with Betsy is heard wherever you hear podcasts. Amazon.com is one of them. But wherever you hear your podcast, you'll hear Chatting with Betsy. And it's free to subscribe so you don't miss guests like Jenny Lee Hodgins. So please subscribe. And as always, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind. So I wanted to say thank you. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. Bye-bye.